Now let's talk about something rather fascinating, a philosophical kerfuffle that has been quietly rumbling on for centuries. It's called nominalism. The word itself comes from the Latin nomen, which simply means name, and that, in a nutshell, is the heart of the matter. Nominalism is the rather straightforward idea that things which we group together under a single name, like dog or chair, don't actually share some mysterious invisible dogness or chairness. Instead, they are just a collection of individual objects that we, for the sake of convenience and tidy language, have decided to label with a common term. It's a beautifully simple, almost refreshingly minimalist way of looking at the world around us. Imagine you have 3 different dogs in front of you, a boisterous golden retriever, a tiny trembling chihuahua, and a wise old basset hound with ears that could double as tea towels. A nominalist would argue that the only thing these 3 creatures truly have in common is that we humans have slapped the label dog onto each of them. There isn't some ethereal, perfect form of the dog floating about in a platonic heaven, of which these 3 are mere earthly copies. They are simply 3 distinct, furry individuals. Their shared name is a human invention, a useful bit of mental shorthand, but nothing more profound than that. It helps us communicate, but it doesn't point to a deeper universal reality. This perspective challenges us to think about how we categorize everything. Take the color red. Is there a universal property of redness that exists independently of all red things? The nominalist would give a cheerful not at all. They would say there are red pillar boxes, red London buses, red apples, and red roses. But the concept of redness itself is just a name we use to describe a certain range of light frequencies that our eyes perceive in a similar way. The name is a tool for communication, a sound we make, but it doesn't correspond to a real abstract entity. The world, for the nominalist, is populated only by particulars, not by grand, overarching universals. So, in essence, nominalism is a philosophy of specifics. It champions the individual over the general. It suggests that our language, while incredibly useful, can sometimes trick us into believing in the existence of abstract concepts that are, in reality, just linguistic conveniences. It's a bit like looking at a constellation in the night sky. We see the Plough or Orion's belt, but those are just patterns we've imposed on a scattering of entirely separate individual stars. The names help us navigate, but the constellation itself isn't a single, real object up there. The universe, according to this view, is a grand collection of one-offs. The core belief of a nominalist, then, is that reality is composed entirely of particular things. There are no universals, no abstract properties that exist in their own right. When a nominalist looks at the world, they see a magnificent mosaic of individual items, each one unique. They would argue that any similarities we perceive between these items are just that, perceptions. We notice that one apple and another apple are both round and grow on trees, so we group them under the name apple. The name is a product of our minds, a convenient label, not a reflection of some shared metaphysical appleness that both objects possess. It's a very grounded, down-to-earth perspective on existence. This view has profound implications for how we understand ideas. Concepts like justice, beauty, or humanity are not, for the nominalist, real things that exist independently of human thought and action. Justice isn't some cosmic principle we can tap into. It is simply a name we give to a collection of specific actions or legal systems that we happen to approve of. We might call a particular court ruling just, and a specific act of kindness just, but the word justice is merely a summary of those individual instances. It lives in our language and our societies, not in the fabric of the universe itself. Furthermore, nominalists believe that objects are just objects, full stop. They don't participate in or exemplify some higher form. A chair is a particular assembly of wood, metal, and fabric. Another chair is a different assembly. We call them both chair because we can sit on them, but this shared function doesn't imbue them with a common essence of chairness. This strips the world of a layer of abstraction that many other philosophies take for granted. It forces us to confront the concrete, the tangible, and the specific, rather than getting lost in lofty, general categories that might not be as real as we assume. This focus on the particular means that knowledge, for a nominalist, is built from the ground up. We learn about the world by observing individual things and noticing their resemblances. We don't start with a grand definition of mammal and then see how a whale fits in. Instead, we observe a whale, a bat, and a human, Notice they all have certain features in common, like giving birth to live young and producing milk, and we invent the category mammal to describe this observed group. The category is a human creation, a useful filing system for our observations, not a pre-existing box that nature has already neatly sorted for us. Now, to truly appreciate the starkness of nominalism, one must introduce its great philosophical rival, realism. If nominalism is the belief that universals are just names, realism is the exact opposite. Realism, particularly in its Platonic form, argues that these universals are not only real, but are, in fact, more real than the individual objects we see around us. A realist would contend that the concept of dog, the perfect, eternal, and unchanging essence of dogness, truly exists in some higher abstract realm. The various dogs we meet in our daily lives are merely imperfect copies or shadows of this one true form of the dog. This creates a completely different picture of reality. For a realist, the world of our senses is fleeting and deceptive, while the world of universals, of justice, beauty, redness, and humanity, is permanent and true. When we identify a particular act as just, a realist would say we are recognizing its participation in the universal form of justice. Our ability to see the commonality between a golden retriever and a chihuahua is not because we invented a label, but because both animals genuinely share in the universal essence of dog. Our minds are not inventing categories, they are discovering pre-existing ones. Let's return to our simple example of colors. The nominalist says red is just a name for a collection of different red things. The realist, however, would argue that redness itself is a real existing property. The red postbox, the red apple, and the red sunset all have this property in common because they all partake in this universal redness. This universal is what makes them all red. It's a real feature of the world that exists independently of our minds and our language. It would exist even if no humans were around to name it. The universe, for the realist, comes with its categories already built in. So, the contrast is quite dramatic. The nominalist sees a world of individual items that we group together with names. The realist sees a world where individual items are defined by the universal essences they embody. For the nominalist, humanity is just a word we use to describe 8 billion odd unique individuals. For the realist, humanity is a real shared essence, and each of us is an individual manifestation of that single universal nature. One view places the ultimate reality in the particular, the other places it in the general. It's a fundamental disagreement about what is truly real. You might be thinking, this is all terribly interesting, but what does a medieval philosophical debate about universals have to do with my life in 2025? It's a fair question, but the distinction between these two viewpoints has surprisingly far-reaching consequences. It shapes how we approach science, ethics, politics, and even our own identity. It's not just about dogs and colors, it's about the very structure of our knowledge and values. This isn't merely an abstract puzzle, it's a foundational question about how we make sense of everything. Consider science. A scientist with realist leanings might believe they are discovering immutable universal laws of nature, like gravity or electromagnetism, that exist independently of our experiments. They are uncovering a pre-existing mathematical reality. A scientist with a more nominalist bent, however, might see these laws as incredibly useful models and descriptions that we have created. They are powerful human inventions that help us predict phenomena, but we shouldn't mistake the model for the reality itself. This subtle difference in perspective can influence the entire direction of scientific inquiry and our confidence in its conclusions. In the realm of ethics and politics, the stakes are even higher. A realist might argue that concepts like human rights or justice are universal and absolute truths, grounded in a real, shared humanity. This provides a very strong foundation for arguing that these rights should apply to everyone, everywhere, without exception. A nominalist, on the other hand, would see human rights as a social construct, a powerful and profoundly important one, to be sure, but one that was agreed upon by people. This view might seem weaker, but it also allows for more flexibility and cultural evolution, as it frames these rights as a conversation rather than a rigid, decreed fact. Ultimately, this debate forces us to ask a crucial question. Do we discover the world, or do we invent it? Do our categories carve reality at its natural joints, as the realist believes? Or are they simply convenient, man-made tools for navigating a world of infinite, unique particulars, as the nominalist insists? There is no simple answer, and brilliant minds have argued passionately for both sides for well over 1,000 years. But thinking about it changes how you see everything. It makes you question the very words you use every day and wonder about the deep relationship between your mind, your language, and the magnificent, baffling reality we all share. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more interesting learning lessons.